If you have a desire to become a better version of your current self, then this podcast is for you. I share with you helpful thoughts, tips, and stories surrounding fitness and self-improvement which you can apply to your life today. So for those of you that want to take control of your life, to learn, to grow, to become that which you desire most, I am your host, Connor Malone, and this is the pursuit of constant improvement. In today's episode, we are talking optimism. And as I said in the title, optimistic as fuck. That is what we're going to be talking about today. And this comes from a conversation I had with a friend last week. And basically he was asking me about, we were having this conversation about things that were maybe a difficult situation as some people would see it. And what he shared with me is he said, he was like, how do you see things? Like you're optimistic, you're positive as fuck. That's what he was saying, right? And that's how I took it, optimism. Okay, that's what we began to speak about from there. And it's something I want to speak about today in terms of how you can change your mindset and your perception to see the world through a more optimistic lens. And what I'm going to be speaking about today is something called rational optimism. Because you've probably heard of it before. Some people say, oh, I'm a realist, okay? I'm not a pessimist, I'm not an optimist, I'm a realist, okay? And there's a clear distinction between the three. Now, a pessimist is somebody who tends to see the negative in life. A rationalist is somebody who sees the world for what it is. And an optimist tends to be somebody who sees, obviously, everything as, everything's going to be okay. They're obviously happier. But what people, rationalists, would say as well, they are not being true. They are not being logical and rational about the way the world really is. Now, rational optimism combines the two. So you've got that logical, rational thinking, but you also have this optimism, this view of the world that things will be okay and that things will go the way that you want them to go inevitably. Now, this is an attitude, this is a mindset where you see the positives in the world. And the reason I want to speak about this today is because the conversation that arose from me and my friend was the fact that people are drawn towards you if you are optimistic. It radiates, optimism radiates, and it's an amazing thing. I love being around optimistic people. It makes you happier. It makes you, again, it radiates. It brings people towards you. So I think it's a real good trait that people can embody, and it's something that can be learned, optimism. A lot of people may have grown up pessimistic, but it is something that can be learned and changed. Now, optimism is defined as hopefulness and confidence about the future or of the success of something. Okay, rational optimism is the practice of taking a realistic assessment of what is going on in the world and choosing to be positive and joyful regardless. Now, how good does that sound? I would much rather be that person that sees the world through that lens. Yes, they see the realistic objectivism of the world, but they also see it through that optimistic lens going forward. Because Naval Ravikant speaks about this, and he says, rational in the sense that you have to see the world for what it really is, and yet you have to be optimistic about your own capabilities and your capability to get things done. So again, we're going to talk about that, how you can cultivate that mindset of being, yes, real about how the world is and the circumstances, but how you can be optimistic about the future and you can respond in that positive way. Because as I says, it radiates and it brings people towards you from there. It's a great attitude to have. So if you're sick of maybe having that negative attitude, maybe you respond pessimistically to things, which again is natural. I always used to do it because we tend to be brought up in a world where negativity is shared among people. They say, oh, did you hear about this? Oh, what about this? People talk about people behind their backs. They talk bad about people. People love negativity. And negativity loves company. But what we want to do is rid ourselves of that, try to change our perspective in the world and our lens in the world from here so that we feel more positive, whether that's in the face of challenges or just in our general interactions in daily life. We feel optimistic and we have rational optimism going forward. Now, these habits or actions that I speak about today can help you do that. It's things that I have been working on to try and cultivate a rational optimism, because again, we don't want to just be purely led in the wrong way by just a straight optimism. We want to be rational about our thinking going forward. Now, one of the first things that I think is so important with optimism is realizing what you can and can't control. Because people that are pessimistic about life tend to not understand the things that they cannot control. They get angry at things when they happen. Okay, things that we can't control, they get angry at them, which is wasted time. When you think of it rationally and logically, if something happens and you can't control it, All you're doing is wasting energy by getting annoyed at that. And I'll give you an example. Let's say there's two guys waiting to go on a train. They're waiting for the train to come in. They've both got places to be. They're both probably stressed out and they've got a busy day ahead of them. But they see on the board that the train has been cancelled and it's not coming in. Now, there's two different reactions. One guy goes off his nut, starts shouting and swearing, complaining about the train coming. They say, oh, this is rubbish, this is shit, I can't believe this has happened. And they start blaming the other people. Oh, this is rubbish, I'm just going to go home. I'm never going to be able to get to my work on time. Whereas the other person thinks, all right, okay, they're rational. This isn't ideal, but it's happened. So how can I respond to this? Well, maybe they look to say, right, well, I'll get there another way. They straight away are rational about it. They look at it and look for solutions. Whereas the other person's been caught up in the negativity of it and can't believe what's happened, so they're not even trying to start to plan and strategize how they're going to overcome that. Now, one person will take that with them the rest of the day. The pessimist will complain it to about everybody. The first person they meet, they'll say, oh, you'll not believe what happened. The bloody train got cancelled. They'll shout and they'll swear about it. And guess what? That is infectious. If you meet somebody and the first thing they say to you is negative and they're complaining, people don't want to be around you. And you can control that. Whereas the rational optimist, they would have found the solution and they would have went ahead with that plan and they would have followed through on it. And they would have seen it as, well, it's not the end of the world. I'll just push on with my day and go forward from that. So that's two different perspectives. The same thing has happened to both people, but they both responded to it differently. And that's because one person didn't understand that that was out with their control, so they got angry at it. But the other person understood, the rational optimist, that, okay, this is out with my control. How can I respond to this? How can I act accordingly? And they'd done that. So they didn't let it affect the rest of their day going forward. There's a quote from a very famous philosopher, Jack Jarvis. He says, when life gives you melons, make melonade. But if you've heard the real quote, it's, well, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And that really actually explains what we just spoke about. Now, a lemon is something that it suggests sourness and difficulty, right? That's the meaning of that quote. But when you do get that difficult situations, you make lemonade out of it. You make the good of it. So maybe, for example, when that train was cancelled, you think, all right, well, I'll just need to walk. Well, it's a lovely day. Maybe I'll enjoy the view when I walk. Maybe I'll get more time to catch up with somebody on the phone, or you'll get to do something, or you'll just get to take in more fresh air rather than being stuck on a train. You take the positives from that. That is what a rational optimist would do, rather than the pessimist is just drawn into all the negativity with that situation from there. So what we're going to talk about is habits and actions that you can take to help you change the lens that you see that world through, so you can be that person who reacts in the positive way rather than the pessimistic way. But again, you're still reacting with rationalism. You're not saying like, oh, well, a train will come in a minute. Oh, a train will come in 2 minutes. That would be unguided optimism. Okay, you still need to be rational, but then you can be optimistic after that. Now, one of the first habits which is going to help you cultivate that type of optimism is going to be surrounding yourself with a positive environment. Because most of us, we can't necessarily control the people we're around all the time. Maybe you live at home with your family or with somebody else. They might necessarily be negative. You might not be able to control that. But what you can control about your environment at this time, right now, is what you're consuming. So that could be online, it could be from your TV, it could be what you're reading. These things are part of your environment and you can control that. So as well as your environment in terms of what you consume, the people you're around, it could be your friend groups, they are super easy to control. Now I know it's not necessarily an easy thing to change, but it is something that you always have control over, the people that you're friends with. Because what we find is that people don't even choose their friends. You go to school people because you're in the same year as them. You're friends with them throughout school, so you're friends with them after school. You didn't necessarily choose to be friends with them. You might have in the beginning, but you've just kept being friends with them. You're friends by default. Whereas what that can do is lead us to believe that we should stay friends with them, whereas they may be one of the main sources of our negativity and that pessimism, which is always going to stop you from being an optimist. So have a look at your friend group, see like, am I actually friends with this person or am I just friends with them by default? And if you are, there's a good chance that if that's somewhere where some of that pessimism is coming from, you can change that. You can spend less time with them and you can start to surround yourself with more positive people. And if you don't know any positive people yet, then you get that through content. So the stuff you're reading online, the stuff you're watching online, it has to be positive. The news tends to be pessimistic. because negativity sells. It gets attention. Positivity doesn't get as much attention. So that's why the news is always filled with negativity. And if all you're watching is the news, all you're going to see is negativity. So definitely think of that. Think of your environment, not just the people you're spending time with, but also the things that you're consuming, whether that be online, through your phone, through your TV, because you can change those things. Because it will infect the way you think. That's the whole point in changing your environment. It infects the way you feel. Think of how you feel after you've been around someone super positive. You just get a wee kick in your step. You feel better. Whereas if it's somebody that's negative and down all the time, they will bring you down with them from there. So you can choose to change that from there. You can read or listen to positive things. You can choose podcasts rather than the news. Or you could choose books rather than scrolling through Twitter and looking at gossip and all the shit that you read all day, every day. You have that choice, and those are things that you can do to change your environment, which again changes your perspectives and makes you more of that optimist that we were speaking about. Now, the next thing, which I see every optimist, in fact, there's a guy that comes into the gym that I work at, and he's the epitome of an optimist, a rational optimist. And one of the things that I would describe him as is grateful. This guy's incredibly grateful. It could be pissing with rain outside. He comes in with a smile on his face. He's always grateful about something. It's amazing to see. And when we think logically or rationally, why wouldn't we be optimistic? We live in more abundance now than anybody ever has in human history. We have access to absolutely everything we could ever need. So if we zoom out, we actually look and realize, holy shit, I have a lot. I have a lot to be grateful for and a lot to be thankful for. Like an iPhone, for example. You didn't have to go and make that thing. You didn't need to come up with the idea and create the technology behind it. Yes, you paid money for it, but somebody else put the hard work and effort and labour into that. And all you had to do was pay money for it. Now you have access to the internet. That's things that people take for granted. That's what gratitude is. We're grateful for things that people often take for granted, like the ability to walk, the ability to talk, the ability to listen, to laugh with friends. These are things that everybody takes for granted. Whereas if you become grateful for those things, you start to have a more optimistic view in the world. And that's one of the biggest things that I've practiced. I'm coming up right now on my 1,000th day of my gratitude journal using the Calm app. Now, of those 1,000 days, because I have forced myself to write down 3 things I'm grateful for, whether I felt optimistic or not, what that has helped me to then cultivate is this lens of the world. So when something happens, I much better now see the positive. Now, don't get me wrong, my impulsive decision is, oh, this is shit, that's shit. But then I catch myself and I think, hold on a minute. You should be grateful. Look at all the things you have. And you can start to cultivate that type of optimism by practicing gratitude, which again is just saying what you're grateful for. It could be, I'm grateful for my partner or a family member. I'm grateful for having a gym membership. I'm grateful for having a car or being able to walk, for having running water. Try and choose the most simple things, because those are the things that we take for granted the most. And those are the things that if you didn't have, you couldn't live without. So again, the best ways to do that, to practice gratitude, is by, you can write them down, you can write them in your notes, you can use an app. I use the Calm app. It's got a gratitude section on it. Again, just ask me every day to write 3 things that I'm grateful for. That's the way I do it. You can think about it in your head. I have these 2 things as well that trigger gratitude for me, and it's always a great reminder. And it is funeral cars and ambulances. When I drive past either of them, boom, the thought comes into my head. Like, because both of them don't tend to be good things. If you see either of them, somebody's dead or somebody's hurt. And it makes me realize, shit, I am lucky. Like, I'm driving somewhere, maybe in a bad mood, or work's not been good this morning, or something happened or whatever. I'm driving, then I go past one of them, whether that be an ambulance or a funeral car, and I think, shit. It allows me to zoom out and think, God, you're so lucky. Like, just think of how lucky you are. And by practicing that type of gratitude, we become that rational optimist. We become more optimistic about life. And again, that will just lure people in and want to spend time with you from there, because we're almost rewiring our brain with gratitude by repeating it. And that takes us on nicely to our next thing. And it is with positive self-talk, affirmations. They're different things, and they mean different things to different people. But the reason I want to speak about this is because what you tell yourself, you will start to believe. If you repeat something enough, you will start to believe it. And a lot of people do that more so in the negative tense. Over in their head, they'll tell themselves something, that they're not worthy of something, that they're useless, that they're stupid. And see, if you tell yourself that enough, you will start to believe it. The same can be true for positivity and optimism. Like, for example, gratitude, how I just explained it. You can rewire your brain to think that way. Neuroplasticity, for example, is the term that people explain it by. You use it. If you don't use it, you lose it. If you keep repeating things, your brain will kind of rewire almost. That's one term that is used to explain it. And then you'll start to think differently. So again, you can do that by the way you speak to yourself. Now, just because you say something doesn't make it true. I'm very aware of that. If you say to yourself, I am confident, it's not necessarily going to make you confident. But if you start treating yourself a little bit better, you start talking to yourself in a better way, you'll start to think yourself of more of a friend. You'll start to, because imagine this. Imagine you go out and you fuck up, you do something wrong, right? Maybe you slept in for work, maybe you overdone it when you were out at the weekend, whatever. If a friend done that, you would offer them advice. You would be kind to them. So why wouldn't you do that to yourself? Whereas you beat down on yourself, you're too hard on yourself from there. Because there's something that Seneca said. He was quoting another philosopher and he said, what progress, you ask, have I made? I have begun to be a friend to myself. Because so many people are not a friend to themselves. They speak about themselves so negatively. How could you be an optimist when all you say to yourself is negative things? So I want you to think of it like that in terms of positive self-talk. By changing your inner dialogue, you can start to be more optimistic. Now, your inner dialogue, what I mean by that is you think of, see if you sit in silence, obviously you're always constantly thinking. And for a lot of us, we hear a voice in our head. Like, it might be saying, what am I having for dinner tonight? It might be saying something simple, right? But you're always talking, you're always thinking. And that's your inner dialogue. A lot of times that tends to be negative. A good chunk of our thoughts as human beings can be negative, and we're not necessarily going to be able to change that. But what we can change is how we respond to that. And we can be more optimistic. For example, being easy on ourselves. Now, that can obviously be at certain times. We don't want to always be easy on ourselves if we're not holding ourselves accountable. We need to still hold ourselves accountable, but we can't treat ourselves like shit. Because if you continue to do that, you can never be a rational optimist going forward. So what you say to yourself is really important. That's what I want to get at from here. Your environment will impact that, your habits, your self-talk. All of this will impact the type of, like, how you see yourself, that inner dialogue, that speech that you have with yourself going forward. So a really important one from there is if you keep talking to yourself in that negative way, you're never going to be an optimist. So start being kinder to yourself, and whatever you say you're going to do, back that up with some action, and you will start to believe that. Now, the takeaways from today's episode, what I would love for you to take away and what I think you would find some value in would be also using these 4 things that I spoke about to help change your perspective, because no money will get you any of these things. They have to be done by yourself. Now, what I said today, everything comes from practicing it. Practicing these things will make you more optimistic, whether that be gratitude. If you practice gratitude on a more frequent basis, you'll start to respond in a more grateful way. Whether it be realizing what you can and can't control, you have to practice that. So when something happens, you need to think, wait, can I control this? No. Well, I will control how I respond to that. Really important things from there. Again, that positive self-talk, being, as Seneca said, more of a friend to yourself. If you learn to be a friend to yourself, you're going to be more optimistic in general. Whereas if you're always negative to yourself, that is going to show in the way that you obviously just walk around, the way you talk, the way that you act going forward from there. The positive environments that we spoke about, super important. Not just who you spend your time with, but what you consume. All of these things have a huge impact on us. And generally, if we control those things and we start to change them, we can be more of that rational optimist, which would be an incredible way to be. It's an incredible thing to pursue, is to try and be that rational optimist. Now, the quote I'm going to leave you with today is by someone called William James, who was an American philosopher and psychologist. And what he said was, the greatest revolution of our generation is the discovery that human beings, by changing their inner attitudes of their minds, can change the outer aspects of their lives. Now that just highlights what we spoke about with that inner dialogue. Okay, by changing the inner attitudes of our minds, we can change the outer aspects of our lives. So again, the way that you see the world will impact how you act in that world. If you become rational and become optimist, you'll tend to push forward with what you want, with your self-improvement, with your fitness. You'll push on forward with those. So I hope that quote brings you some value, because it certainly brings me some value, some clarity as well, and you can push forward with that. But as ever, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope you gained something from it, something that can help you in your own pursuit of constant improvement. Thank you for listening.